Hey everybody, welcome back to the Modern Trumpeter Podcast. Today we have a very special guest, principal trumpet player from the Cleveland Orchestra, Michael Sachs. Praised by critics for exemplifying how brass playing can be at once heroic and lyrical, Cleveland Orchestra principal trumpeter Michael Sachs is recognized internationally as a leading soloist, recitalist, chamber musician, teacher, author, and clinician. He is the longest-serving principal trumpet in the Cleveland Orchestra history, and recently received the International Trumpet Guild's highest honor, the ITG Honorary Award, given annually to individuals who have made extraordinary contributions to the art of trumpet playing. From 1988 until 2023, Michael Sachs served as chair of the brass division and head of the trumpet department at the Cleveland Institute of Music. He has also taught at Northwestern University and Rice University. He has served on the faculty of leading summer festivals, including Aspen Music Festival, National Brass Symposium, National Orchestral Institute, Summer Brass Institute, and Summit Brass, and regularly presents masterclasses and workshops throughout the United States, Europe, and Asia. Originally from Santa Monica, California, Mr. Sachs attended the University of California at Los Angeles, where he received a Bachelor of Arts degree in History before continuing studies at the Juilliard School. His former teachers include Ziggy Elman, Mark Gould, Anthony Plogue, and James Stamp. Prior to joining the Cleveland Orchestra, Michael Sachs was a member of the Houston Symphony Orchestra. Mr. Sachs joined the faculty at the Curtis Institute of Music in 2024. And of course, as a reminder, we are in the process of writing a book called The Modern Trumpeter, a guide to building a versatile and successful career. This book will be available at the end of 2026 and features insights and stories from over 50 professional trumpet players of all musical backgrounds, including Wayne Bergeron, Bobby Shew, Bria Skonberg, Bijon Watson, Marcus Printup, Kellen Hannis, Kiku Collins, Jerry Hay, Brian MacDonald, Josh Kaufman, Michael Sachs, and many, many more. To receive updates on this book and other offerings, sign up for our email list at moderntrumpeter.com. You can also follow us on Instagram and at YouTube at Modern Trumpeter. And if you enjoy the podcast, please share it with another trumpet player you know. And now, here is my interview with Michael Sachs. Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming again to the Modern Trumpeter Podcast. Today, we get to speak with trumpeter Michael Sachs. Michael, thank you so much for having us today.
It's a pleasure, Jaden. Nice to see you.
Yes, you as well. Can you first tell us a little bit about your background, kind of how you first got into the trumpet, and at what moments or point in time you were like, yeah, I want to make this my life and my career?
Hi. I'll try to give you the quick version here. Basically, I grew up I was born and raised in Santa Monica, California, and my parents were not musicians. My dad ran an ad agency and my mom worked in the ad agency with him. Music in the schools in Santa Monica was very, very strong. Santa Monica wasn't part of the LA school district. It's its own school district, and it's basically you had a number of elementary schools feeding, a couple of junior high schools feeding one high school.
Oh, wow.
And the music was very strong. I mean, pretty much anybody who wanted to play an instrument, when you got into fifth grade, you could choose anything from strings, winds, brass, percussion. And, they kind of funneled you to various teachers for various lessons and access to instruments. So where I came in, I have a sister who's a year older. And when she was in kindergarten, when I was 4 years old, we went to her open house in like October in the fall of her kindergarten year. And I was in pre-K. I was 4 years old. And the elementary band played, and a kid got up and played, the tune Never on Sunday.
Yeah.
From Zorba the Greek. And I thought it was the greatest thing I ever heard. This trumpet soloist playing this tune, and I wanted to play trumpet. So my mom took me to the local music store, and they took one look at me, and they said, okay, well, there's only one problem. I didn't have any front teeth. So they're like, bring him back when he gets his front teeth, he gets his front teeth in. And so I had to wait a couple of years. And then when I was 6.5, I was in first grade, and, I really wanted to play trumpet. So my parents took me down the same music store, and I started taking lessons with a man by the name of Ziggy Elman, who, if you look him up, was a very famous big band player. Goodman and Dorsey Brothers and everyone in between, had his own band, had a couple big hits. One was called And the Angels Sing. I think it's 1939, 40, 41, somewhere in there. Anyhow, so Mr. Elman was the one who started me off. And then throughout elementary school, junior high school, I played in all the groups. And by the time I got to high school, I was playing the marching band, the wind ensemble, the jazz band, the orchestra, which was like an 80-piece orchestra playing.
Wow.
Pictures had an exhibition, and parts of Petrushka and Scheherazade and Beethoven
Wow.
symphonies, and Hindemith's Symphonic Metamorphosis, Tchaikovsky symphonies. I mean, big standard repertoire.
Yeah.
And which is unique for
Yeah.
something like that. And then I was also playing, I'd grown up on, horn band stuff with, Chicago, Earth, Wind and Fire, Blood, Sweat and Tears, that kind of stuff. And so I was playing in a couple of horn bands, playing, cover bands, playing all that stuff coming up as well. So I was doing a very, a huge variety of things.
Yeah, that's
And
pretty
then
much
when it
everything.
then when it came time to figuring out whether to go to college or not, my teacher at the time really wanted me to go to Eastman where he had gone. And my parents didn't necessarily want me to go. My father in particular wanted me to go more of a business route and circle around and take over his business. So the net of it is that I decided I kind of split the difference, and I decided to go to UCLA and get a broader degree. I ended up getting a history degree, not a music degree.
Interesting.
So I studied history, mostly Civil War to World War II, some Cold War history, also some immigration history, and then kind of a minor in more Japanese history.
Wow.
And then, but at the same time, I was playing, I played in the marching band for a year at UCLA. I played in the wind ensemble. I was studying with Tony Plogue, starting through about halfway through my senior year in high school, all the way through my undergrad. And Tony was a huge reason why I've had any success that I've had ever since I started studying with him when I was 17. So I was doing all the playing. I was playing in a couple groups, a couple youth orchestras. One, the Young Musicians Foundation Debut Orchestra, and American Youth Symphony were the two big orchestras that were going on in Los Angeles for like undergrads, grad students, people just out of college. I mean, there wasn't a New World Symphony down in Miami at the time. Those kind of functions, those kind of groups, like kind of the best young musicians who didn't have a job yet were playing in those groups. And one group, the debut orchestra, was playing kind of more classical repertoire, and the American Youth Symphony was playing, bigger, Mahler symphonies and the big Strauss and Shostakovich and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Both those groups throughout pretty much my whole undergraduate years, plus taking lessons with Tony Plogue, I was doing all the playing of any music, student. I just wasn't taking any of the classes.
Sure. Yeah.
So then when it came time, toward the end of my undergrad, I had started doing some stuff in the summers. Like one summer, I ended up subbing in Music Academy of the West for a couple weeks. I was teaching there, and something happened with one of the trumpet players, so I ended up going up there for a couple weeks. Then the next summer, after my sophomore year, I went and did the Empire Brass Quintet Symposium for 4 weeks. I was around the Tanglewood guys and around Sam Palafian and all, that group then.
Yeah.
Then the following summers, really when it was kind of a light bulb moment for me, was when I was at Aspen, studying with Lou Ranger and around Ray Mace and Chris Gecker and wonderful players, students as well. That's really when I decided, okay, I feel like I'm having a lot of success with this. It's really what I love. I feel like I'm good enough. I can give this a shot. I really want to give this a shot. That's when it really turned into a different thing.
Sure. Yeah.
And then in the meantime, through Sam Palafian, for my time at the Empire Brass Quintet Symposium, I started going to New York on business with my parents, and I started to get to know Mark Gould, who Sam had introduced me to.
Yeah.
And then that was really the motivation for me wanting to go to New York, to go to Juilliard, was to study with Mark Gould.
Yeah. Okay.
So at the end of my undergrad, I was lucky enough to get accepted to Juilliard, and that's where I went, basically to start all over again as a 21-year-old freshman.
Yeah.
It was just kind of kooky, but I've done all the playing, but not the classes. So I'm in New York, I'm studying with Gould, and I'm there. And then basically the beginning of my junior year there, I won my job in the Houston Symphony, which was fourth utility. And then I stayed the rest of the year in kind of like an artist degree program, or like an artist diploma program, where I was just playing in the orchestra, doing brass quintet, chamber music, studying with Gould. I wasn't taking any classes. So I don't have a music degree of any kind. Kind of, my degree is more of a, experience playing degree.
Sure. Yeah.
But one other person I didn't mention yet is James Stamp. And about halfway through my junior year at UCLA studying with Tony started doing a much more focus on his composition and less on his teaching. So what he did is he only taught me and Pat Kunke, a wonderful trumpet player, is a dear friend who plays in Nashville all these years. So Tony would see me and Pat maybe once a month And then he organized with Mr. Stamp for us to see Mr. Stamp the other weeks.
Interesting.
I started studying with Mr. Stamp about halfway through my junior, all through my senior for about that year and a half. And in many ways, that time with Mr. Stamp is kind of, I like to say, it's a genesis moment.
Sure. Yeah.
Kind of like there was before and then everything since. Tony, Tony Plogue was already taking me that direction, was very much a disciple and very influenced by Mr. Stamp.
Yeah.
He approached things, and because Tony had studied with Tom Stevens and Malcolm McNabb and these different players like that who were very much disciples of Mr. Stamp.
Yeah.
So I was already very well versed in it, but to go straight to the source to Mr. Stamp was illuminating.
Oh yeah.
And that's really what's carried a lot. What I'm going to talk about is a lot of that carry forward from Mr. Stamp that over the last 40 odd years, 45 years, 43 years since then, has really carried me forward, that whole philosophy and that whole approach, and how I've been able to apply it in a number of different manners. Not only the way Mr. Stamp had me apply it, but just taking those concepts and then applying them in general to a lot of other ways that I've kind of found worked in increasingly evolving better ways for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. That would be incredible to study with. You're listening to all these people, and I'm like, oh, that's.
No, I was so fortunate to be around these guys. And then I was in Houston for a couple of years, and then kind of fast forwarding. And then after a couple of years in Houston, I won my job here in Cleveland in May of '88 and started in September of '88. And that's where I've been ever since.
You're still going strong.
So far, I'm going to knock on wood and be my grandmother in Brooklyn. So far, so good. But look, man, I've been really lucky. I mentioned, Tony and Mark Gould and Mr. Stamp and Lou Ranger. And on top of that, there were other people, going to hear Phil Smith all the time and being around him. And Phil became in many ways a mentor and kind of an older brother to me.
Yeah.
He's exactly 10 years older than me. And he started in New York at exactly the same age, 26, that I started here. And he was in Chicago for 2 years prior to that, his fourth utility.
Yeah.
It's a similar trajectory that he was basically 10 years ahead of me.
Yeah.
Somebody that I always looked up to. Voisin was another person that I got to know doing Tanglewood a summer there. And then over the years talking with him and using him as a very trusted soundboard. Under Gatala became that as well. Bernie Edelstein, my predecessor, became a very dear friend.
Yeah.
And I can't not mention David Zauder, who was the wonderful second trumpet player, first cornet player here in Cleveland, who we overlapped my first 9 years and became as much a father to me as my own father.
Wow.
And somebody whose influence burns very, very brightly within me every moment I pick up a trumpet. I mean, all of these guys, not to mention all the people that I heard growing up, the Bud Herseths and Tom Stevens growing up in LA was a huge, huge influence. Probably the biggest influence on me as far as just the archetype of what an orchestral trumpet player can sound like.
Yeah.
Optimal. And also Tom was also very much of this lineage from Mr. Stamp, and very much I used to talk about him and still do as a poster child of, you do Stamp right, you can sound like this.
Yeah.
Evenness in his playing and his ability to play anything from Barrio Sequenza to a Mahler symphony to whatever it was. I mean, it just in the most spectacular, consistent, wonderful fashion. I mean, Tom was a huge influence. Mr. Herseth as well. Other people I listened to, Maurice Andre, Morris Murphy. The list goes on. I mean, there's a lot of different people I've kind of used as touchstones along the way, and listen to what they did and just like, man, how do they make that sound? How do they do that thing? And then figuring out how I can incorporate that into my own playing. And, just, I don't know, there's just a lot of things that have inspired and motivated me over the years that, and there's all these younger players too, man. There's guys like Chris Martin and, a lot of even younger guys than that, guys coming up, like James Vaughn and Will Leathers. And I mean, there's a lot of young guys out there, Conrad Jones, and it's a great playing. It continues to inspire me. And that's, to me, I guess, if I can kind of wrap in a nutshell, my philosophy and how I've approached all of this is, my dad was very much like this with his business. And I've tried to echo this as well, is that my dad always talked about things as if he was a student. And he was always a perpetual student and always curious and seeking information and seeking to evolve and seeking new information to make what you do better, to understand things deeper, to really search and seek out those people that knew more than he did or that I did, do things better than I can.
Yeah.
And over the course of my life, I've tried to surround myself with those kind of people who were going to challenge me, who I was going to, really be inspired by, and hopefully inspire in turn for different reasons.
Yeah.
That mutual kind of a thing. And that's how I've gone about a lot of this. I saw that in a lot of these older guys I mentioned. I saw a lot of that same kind of, fire throughout their career of like, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know kind of a vibe.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's kind of, here I am. I'm, 38 years into playing in Cleveland, plus the 2 in Houston. I'm 40 years into this. And I still feel like, I'm trying to look at things in a fresh way every time I do it.
Yeah, that's great. You've covered so much. This is so great. I'm like, wow, there's so much to ask now. Boy,
yeah, go for it, man.
Your unique circumstance of like you haven't had a music degree, but you've had all these teachers and stuff. It's definitely not the norm. Very unique. What are your thoughts on like if a young musician is, this could be a big question, but if a young musician is trying to get into an orchestra or just trying to do trumpet in general, is the degree more important or the person you're studying with more important? Or, maybe let's start there.
That's a great question. And it's an important question because I think I probably would have answered this differently maybe 15, 20 years ago or even 40 years ago when I was in that place than I will answer it now.
Sure, yeah.
And, the way I look at things as a teacher, I'm going to answer this in an interesting way, and then I'll come around. Don't worry. But as a teacher, when I'm teaching a student, my feeling is that I'm not just teaching them how to play the trumpet. I'm not just teaching them music. I'm teaching them deduction and critical thinking, assessment, and preparation and execution. Because so much of the time, as a musician, it's a solitary endeavor. If I'm studying with somebody, at best, say I have a 2-hour lesson with them, which might be unique. Say I've got 2 hours of chamber music coaching and 2 hours in a studio class. And maybe even a brass class. So I got 8 hours with them, which is that's best case scenario. The other, 25 hours or whatever that I'm practicing trumpet, I'm on my own in the practice room.
Mm-hmm.
So a great teacher is somebody who shows you and gives you the tools to be able to do the work, the tools to be able to have the thought process for the deductive reasoning and critical thinking it takes to assess what you're doing, come up with a plan. How do I get from point A to point B? I mean, usually it's this. It's rarely a straight line. There's a lot of
like that, right?
As Stamp used to say, sometimes you got to go around the barn a few times before you find the entrance. You got to go down a few blind alleys before you find the street.
That.
I mean, you gotta, there's a lot of trial and error, and there's a lot of failure in practicing. If you just practice what you can already do, that's not going to help you. You got to practice the stuff that is your Achilles heel. You can't be afraid to, I'm going to clean it up here with the language. You cannot be afraid to not sound good when you practice. You can't be afraid of that. It's like you have to lean into it, but you have to be smart about it. You can't practice the trumpet 9 hours a day and bang away at stuff. Otherwise, your face is going to be a hamburger. You got to be smart. It's like your lip is like any other muscle in the body. So you have to condition it. So you have to get the information from somebody who can give you the tools to show you how to warm up, how to create a good fundamentals routine, how to apply those fundamentals into your musical expression, what musical expression you use for different things in different ways, different styles, different pieces, different moments within different pieces. All those things come into play, but you have to have somebody who's a guidepost to help you with creating the thought process to be able to make the right decision. So bringing it full circle, who you study with is a gigantic piece of the puzzle. It's got to be somebody who resonates for you, who has the information that you're seeking, who is teaching a style of playing that you want to emulate, plays in a manner that you want to emulate. That is the type of person who's not dogmatic and saying, in a binary way, black and white, this is one way, the only way to do it, it's one way to do it, it's my way, and that's it. but who's open and is going to teach different people different ways. That's one of the great things I saw about Mr. Stamp is I saw him teach other people. And those same people had similar issues that he was addressing with them, that he was addressing with me, but he addressed it in a completely different manner, in a completely different language, using different exercises, taking a different route, because of the way he knew their thought process and their digestion of information worked. Right? Yeah. So you need to find a teacher who's going to, craft a course of study for you, the individual. So you're Jaden. You're not me. When you come out of that, you're the best version of you. Cultivate that. So I'd say my best piece of advice, seek that first. Find that person. Find an environment where there are great players just who are better than you. Don't just be a big fish in a pond and feel like, okay, this is cool. Might stroke your ego for the moment. Seek out those that do it better. Find out where that is and go there and then listen to them, watch them, and try to figure out what they're doing. That's what I did. I wanted to be around the best players possible. When I was playing in these orchestras in LA, most of the people I was playing with were, 3, 4, 5 years older than me. And they were better than me when I was 19, 20 years old. So I wanted to do that because it's like I watched them and I was like, oh, that's how they do that. Or maybe they did something that I didn't necessarily think, well, I'm not going to do that. That's not my taste. But they did that to get that, so I'm not going to do that. It works both ways. So that's another thing. So environment's very important. And not just as trumpet players, just as musicians in general.
Yeah.
Trumpet players especially, but musicians in general, finding that kind of environment. As an undergraduate, I'm glad I didn't go to a conservatory because as a 17-year-old, coming out of high school, I started my freshman year as a 17-year-old. I turned 18 during the fall of my freshman year. And I didn't have the maturity. I didn't have the focus. I didn't have the mindset. If I would have gone to a conservatory, I wouldn't have made it.
Yeah.
It wasn't for me. I was much better being in a little kind of off the grid environment. Still intensive with somebody like Tony Plow, intensive with being in some of these groups. UCLA Wind Ensemble is a terrific group, and there's some older trumpet players in particular and trombone players who really, really put it out there and really, we're kind of like, wow, okay, that's possible. I got to step up my game. I want to figure that out. So, I was lucky in that sense, but, you have to figure out what resonates for you. Some people coming out of high school, they're ready for a conservatory and they're ready to make that focus. I personally wasn't. So it was better that I was in that environment and able to take my time to figure out when my focus was going to come to music, if it did. Yeah. And when it did, then I was ready. Then I jumped in, 100% all in. So that's kind of the way I'd answer it. I'd say I'd start with, first and foremost, a teacher and a mentor. You don't want somebody who's your dad. You don't want somebody who's your best friend. You want somebody who's your teacher, who's an educator, who's going to teach you, again, not just trumpet, is going to teach you critical thinking and deduction and reasoning and logic and the ability to have the tools to be able to figure it out with their guidance and their kind of guardrails around the circumstances. And then that could be in a university environment as a music major. That could be something like what I did. That could be a conservatory. That could be that could take a lot of different ways, but it's got to be, to me, my best advice to anyone is to follow the path that is singularly best for you. There is no one path that fits everyone. The path I was on happened to get very lucky and it worked. I decided to do it. I mean, when I tell people I didn't decide until I was 20 that I really wanted to do this, they were like, because most people that would be like,
and that's
way
the
too late.
Interesting thing about it's never. I think it's never too late. I think it can be more advantageous if you are young and you're like, I want to do this. But in your case, it still worked out great, and I think that's part of the message I have in the book is look, if you aren't doing it, if you're not fully involved in music and then later you want to go for it, it's possible. Look at Michael Sachs, look at Bijon Watson, there's others in similar situations, but it's worked out. It's been great. And a lot of young musicians that I talk to, when they're talking about going into music, they're always like, well, I want to go to North Texas, or I want to go to Berkeley, and I want to go to these big schools simply because of the name of the school, And which I don't think is necessarily wrong, but like you said, I think making sure that there's the person that's really going to work for you is is at one of those schools. And so would you recommend for those young players before jumping into a bachelor's or a master's program, getting together with the teachers from those schools and seeing which one they work with the best?
Absolutely. Chemistry between teacher and student is essential. And with each of these people, with Tony, with Gould, with Mr. Stamp, I mean, the chemistry was very
Yeah,
palpable and very positive for me. And I
that's
feel like you need to feel that. You need to feel like you're walking away from every lesson feeling challenged and feeling like, sometimes it may be a little tough to swallow, but this ultimately is, I'm on the right path with the right person. That you feel that
yeah,
undercurrent of that. Now that's a very important thing. But again, you go back to, where somebody's going to choose. I mean, all those, North Texas or Berkeley or Juilliard or Curtis or, any of these places, these are
yeah,
magnificent schools and you can't go wrong. It's just a
yeah,
matter of where do you fit. You're going to get the stylistic approach and the philosophy
yeah,
that,
yeah.
that
And
resonates
that
for
that
you.
was the case for me. I just studied here in Utah at a school here, Utah Valley University, and I thought about this. Man, might have been like my junior year. Got a trumpet teacher who came in. His name is Ryan Nielsen. He's a just phenomenal teacher, and he has everything that you're talking about of like just he knows how I think and my process and my background and how to like help me understand things in my way, which was it was incredible to get to work with him and whatnot. But I remember some of the other musicians there, like in the other ensembles and stuff, people just weren't taking it as seriously as I would have liked. And I was like, do I transfer to this other university? Like I was like, I don't know. But then I thought about it. I was like, well, that chemistry is there with this teacher, and it was incredible. So I decided to stay, and thank goodness I did because he changed trumpet playing for me wholly. And it was like, and I went through an injury where my upper lip got torn almost in half. And
Right.
yes, bad habits and and whatnot. And so we spent a lot of time after that. I had 8 months off the horn while I was figuring things out,
Wow.
and then I guess as a quick side story, we there was a doctor in the area who does this with athletes who tear muscles, but he'll draw their blood, take the platelets out, and spin them out and then inject the muscle with that, and it helps heal over the course of a couple weeks and whatnot. And so we approached him saying, because I'd put up the mouthpiece and it would just sharp pain, and so I couldn't even make a sound without it hurting. Standing still it was fine, but every time I put the horn up, it was not feeling good. And so got to meet this doctor. We did this procedure. It hurt terribly. It was awful. But within a month, I was back to
Was that like
playing
PRP?
and
Wow.
going again. So that was PRP.
Yeah.
And so yeah, wouldn't recommend to go. I would recommend that if you needed it, but just don't get yourself there in the first place. It was not great, but he's the one that helped me there. And then right after that, he was like, okay, we really got to like help you understand how this piece of metal works. And I'm like, okay. So I like all of my approach and my teaching totally changed from that my last year of understanding the trumpet. And I'm very glad I didn't transfer schools and that I stayed there. And so yeah, I agree 100%. Okay, so moving on, when you were younger in high school and whatnot, you're playing in all these groups, all these bands, all these genres and styles, and then ultimately decided to go the orchestral route. And maybe this question could be in two parts. Part one, is it important, in your opinion, is it important or not to go through those musical scenarios and be playing that type of music for your overall musicality? And then I guess part two, what was the reasoning behind going into orchestral music as opposed to
First
commercial
of
or
all,
jazz
I think that
or
the
anything else
more
like that?
stylistic arenas that any player can kind of stick their nose in, the better. The more versatile you can be, the more stylistically versatile and, being able to play in many, many different ways and different kinds of groups and different kinds of styles, the more that's going to come into whatever pool you decide to finally swim in. I mean, that's, yeah, that, I mean, I
Yeah.
guess the main reason, I'll kind of answer these both together. The main reason I picked orchestral, it's just the way I played, that it always rang truer to me. I always felt like that was what I was built for. That's what kind of just physically, mentally, my sound, everything just kind of fed that direction. I felt like that was where I found the most success in the classical realm. The commercial stuff,
Okay.
I mean, truth be told, I can't improvise my way out of a paper bag. I mean, so that's not, that's you know, I'm not very good with different languages. I could speak just a little bit of a few different languages, just enough to
Okay.
get by, like minimal kind of conversational get by kind of stuff. And playing the trumpet, like improvisation to me is like speaking a language. It's like
Yeah.
you want to speak it. The way I'd say it is, I can speak it, but it sounds like somebody speaking a language when it's written out in phonetics.
Yeah. Yeah.
The emphasis is wrong. The phrasing isn't quite right, and the consonants and the vowels are right, but the syntax isn't. That's
Everything.
the
Yeah.
best way I can explain my improvisation skills. It's not ready for public consumption, most definitely not.
Yeah.
But I love it when we do like big band shows, and I've been involved in stuff like that or playing in that stuff. I love that. I have a ball. I mean,
Yeah.
I've always been kind of a chameleon, that early on, my teachers got me listening to a lot of different music. And my mom listened to a lot of classical music, and my friends listened, and I listened to a lot of rock music. And then I started listening to a lot of the horn band stuff. Then I got into more jazz and big band stuff. The older I got, so I listened to a wide variety of things. And I found that if I listened to someone or something, I could mimic that sound quite
Yeah.
easily on the horn. I could kind of manipulate my air, and just from here, I could hear it, conceptualize it, and I'd kind of figure out the physical manifestations to make it happen without doing some crazy gyrations and reconfiguring my face. I could do it kind of with the way I'm generally set up.
Yeah. Okay.
So I've always enjoyed that, and I still enjoy that a lot. And if I got a commercial thing coming up, I'll go and listen to some of Doc Severinsen and stuff, and just get that sound
Yeah.
and that kind of production. I've hung out with Doc enough and heard it live that it's like I can kind of imagine it.
Yeah.
But if I go
Yeah.
to I'll go to like Doc doing MacArthur Park on the Jack Jones show, video of him doing that. That's one of my favorite things. I'll go there and I'll just like start listening to the essence of that, or I'll go find some like Arturo Sandoval,
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
like that, and just like get that in my mind, and or go hear a guy like Louis Dowdeswell or Wayne Bergeron, or those kind of
Yeah.
some of the stuff, like some of the pop music like Jerry Hay and Chuck
Yeah.
Finley, and Gary
Hmm.
Grant. Those guys did. Those are kind of my go-tos, that just like I'll listen to that and kind of get it in my head and
Yeah.
figure
Yeah.
out what I need to do with my equipment and my tone production to be able to go there. But I don't know. I always gravitated toward the orchestral stuff. It's where I found my most success, where I felt most comfortable, most at home, where I found that I just fit. It just resonated for me, and it was very, very natural for me to go that direction, while still messing around enough in the other stuff to kind of be able to get by without having to go dive too deep in that pool that I'm going to make a fool out of myself.
Right. Stay on the shallow end, right?
Yep. Stay in the kiddie pool.
Yeah. I think that's great. It's fun to hear somebody of your caliber, and everybody knows you as an orchestral player, but it's fun to hear you and you list off all these other players and all these other genres, and like, yeah, I can
Oh,
do this and all that stuff. Like, I think
oh yeah.
at least I feel like for myself being younger, I was like, I remember they put me in the orchestra one semester, and I was like, orchestra, like this is lame. Like, what am I doing? And then I kind of had that mindset for a lot of my time in college, unfortunately, just because I think I was just so one track. I come from a more lead commercial, and
Mhm.
my home is where everybody's kind of going like this with their ear, covering their ears because it's loud and high and stuff. And so I wish I would have been a little bit more open to stuff. And I was Maynard Ferguson, Wayne Bergeron, listen to and like that was it. And that's what got me into the trumpet really. But then to be like Phil Smith, Michael Sachs, people, and I'm like, I don't do that. I don't listen to that. Or I didn't even know the name Jerry Hay for a long time because I was so focused on other stuff. And so I Yeah, maybe that's another question. It's kind of bouncing off what we've talked about. How important is it for young players to know of the history of trumpet players and the genre, the history, kind of history of the trumpet, history of the players, music, regardless of the genre, knowing where all that music and playing and the pedagogy and everything has come
Yeah,
from?
I personally, I think that is one of the most important pillars that's going to hold up the strength of anyone's playing is that knowledge base and knowing who those players were, knowing how they evolved the craft, knowing what their strengths were, and going and listening to their recordings and hearing how their playing evolved over time, how they changed the landscape and upped the game and evolved things forward and did particular things that were really special. I mean, all the people I mentioned, I mean, there's also the people like the Yuan Raceys and Manny Kleins and Malcolm McNabbs and all the studio guys. There's Bernie Glow and Conrad Gazzo. I mean, because I mean, you mentioned Maynard Ferguson. I mean, Maynard was a huge part of junior high school. Everybody's playing all Maynard stuff. Yeah, I went and saw Stan Kenton back then when I was 15, 16. I mean, it was the coolest thing to hear these guys. Because I studied with Ziggy Elman and he was this big band guy. And I kind of always felt like this real pride that was my first teacher. That's the person who like took a mouthpiece and went on my face. It got me started right. So, I don't know. It's also the historian in me. I mean, being a history major, being interested in history.
Sure, yeah.
I've always been interested in the lineages of all these orchestras and the strengths of these players. And, talking to a Roger Voisin and hearing about George Mager and his father, Rene Voisin, Staliano, the horn player, and Kusevitsky, the stuff, and Charles Munch and people like that in Boston, all sorts of different people in New York. And I did take a couple lessons with Vacchiano and spent a little bit of time with Vacchiano. And then, all those roads like Vacchiano and Stamp, those guys lead back to Schlossberg. And Schlossberg leads back to Wilhelm Wurm and Julius Kosleck, leads back to Ernst Sachse, ultimately leads back to Hummel, which leads back to Haydn, so there's all this connective tissue. But to me, that's the really interesting thing is the connective tissue. We're not that far removed from all of these people.
Yeah.
And then, there are all these lineages going around and just understanding where these people came from in these stylistic lineages and how people played the way they did, how the more Germanic and Russian players played versus the more French players. And how much does that have to do with the language, with the culture, with all sorts of different things. And then now with here in the U.S., it's more of a melting pot. And of course, Schlossberg looms large, but so does Arbonne. And, this whole thing, all roads there kind of lead to Wilhelm Wurm in St. Petersburg, where Schlossberg was for a while. And Julius Kosleck, one of Schlossberg's teachers, was friends with Wurm and played with him in the summers in the opera in St. Petersburg. And Arbonne would go and visit Wurm. And dedicated some pieces to Wurm. So then Schlossberg came over here, and then Schlossberg, was a great teacher who all these great players studied with.
Wow.
And then from there it just goes like this, and then you have the French tree coming from the Boston guys and George Mager, who Herseth and Bernie Edelstein studied with.
Yeah.
And Glantz, who came from Schlossberg, and not from Schlossberg, from Jacob Borodkin was Glantz's main teacher. And that's, again, this Russian, heritage, kind of the Wilhelm Wurm, the guys in Moscow at the Bolshoi and the guys at the Mariinsky in St. Petersburg. So there's all these different convergences of all these trees that kind of mesh now.
Wow.
So, to me, it's fascinating. And then you start seeing, it's like, how has playing changed? You go back and you listen to Timothy Dockchester, who is one of the great artists and musicians who happened to play trumpet. He was this great singer who was using the trumpet as a vehicle, is the way I look at it. You listen to his vibrato, now no one plays like that. You can't really play like that. But there's an essence to it that is still extremely applicable. Maurice Andre, who I was lucky enough to hear in a recital in New York. Maurice Andre live, I have to say, was the most impressive brass playing I have ever heard. And I've heard all those people I've named, I've heard them all. And
Oh,
I've heard all, the Chris Martins and Joe Alessis and Gabar Tarkovi's and Morris Murphys and Bud Herseth and, Tom Stevens and Phil Smith and everyone in between. I've heard
yeah.
them all play magnificently state of the art. Wow, I don't know if anybody could ever possibly do it better. But Andre's trumpet organ recital in New York, it was in the mid 80s, like 84, 5, something like that. As good as his recordings are, live, it was better. It was just,
Man.
I still have this, I still remember sitting in Alice Tully Hall listening to this and just taking it in and thinking, the phrasing, every note, every little detail, every articulation, every sound he made on every note. It was perfect, So yeah, but that's why it's like I'm gonna get on my soapbox because I could be an old fart for a second. When as a student, I had to go to Tower Records and get a record or a CD and bring it home and then put it on and find where the trumpet stuff was or where this excerpt was or listen to all of it. And students now, everything is available. Between Spotify and YouTube and everything in between, you can access every possible recording ever made and then some. Live recording, everything. You can go find a recording of Herbert L. Clark to something that just happened last week. There's not as much curiosity. There's so much more access, but there's less curiosity because it's easy.
Yeah.
And I feel like I wish there was more curiosity in young players to go listen to some of these older players, to go listen to Herbert L. Clark, to go listen to Bomer Krill, another great soloist, any of those great soloists of their day, and go back and listen and know who these guys were and listen to what they did and listen to their artistry. I mean, the sound's a little scratchy. Yeah, the vibrato's a little funky, but kind of listen through it. And there's so much you can learn. And just have that kind of stuff as checkpoints of different things to be able to mimic or incorporate.
Yeah.
That's where I would go. I feel like listening and seeking that kind of stuff out historically is extremely important. Could have just said from the beginning and left it at that. Didn't mean to wax on so long.
No, that's great. Totally agree. As I've been interviewing so many people, I've even with you, I've heard so many names. I'm like, I don't know who that is. I know what my homework is now. I got to go.
Who are some of the names? Let me see if I can help you out here.
Yeah, the Warren Looning, Yuan Racy, Malcolm McNabb. I'd kind of heard of Chuck Finley, but Chuck Finley, a lot of the LA studio guys, Oscar Bashir.
Yeah.
There's so many. Yeah, so many. I'd heard of Tom Stevens from somebody. Talk to somebody. But now there's some other ones you'd mentioned that I'm like, I don't know who that is. So I'm gonna have to go back and do some homework on that. But kind of speaking to that, one of my guys I interviewed was Josh Kaufman over in the Army Blues. He's been big into going down rabbit holes and finding people and all that stuff and whatnot. He said part of it. It's like, yeah, you want to share to a certain extent. He was like, yeah, I can only tell you so much. You got to go figure it out and like put in the work. And so to help jumpstart like a young person's search for all these players and the history and everything, do you know of any resources where some of these names are compiled or there's whatever, like, because we all know Louis Armstrong, Maynard Ferguson, and Bud Herseth and all these people, that's easy to find, but it's like, who else was there that the names just aren't as well known? And has anybody written down lists or made a book or anything about these players?
I mean, there are a few books. There's a book David Hickman did, I know, with that has a history of a lot of various trumpet players and their bios. There's an older book that Louis Davidson did that was compiling a questionnaire. He sent a questionnaire to all these great trumpet players and got back like who is their teacher and what's their equipment and what kind of stuff did they work on. And he just published them in a book, I think without asking them. But it's out there. I think it's like profiles of trumpet profiles or something like that. Louis Davidson. There's also a great book from Ed Tarr called East Meets West, which has a lot of the history going back, kind of the Germany, Eastern European, Russian trumpet history, and also the kind of I think mostly that, but also the French tree and how that all kind of comes together, and some of the various people from that era. And then some of it is also just if you're listening to different orchestras, you're listening to the Cleveland Orchestra, you could look up and you see that it's me or it's Bernie Edelstein, and you start looking into Bernie Edelstein. Really interesting character because Bernie played before he was in Cleveland with Zell in 1960. He was for 10 years, he was in the Minneapolis Symphony, which is now the Minnesota Orchestra. With Dorati, and there's a bunch of recordings on Mercury Records of Bernie playing with the Minneapolis Symphony there's a great Petrushka, it's a great Rite of Spring. I mean, there's some wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
Younger. And then before that, he was a year with Dorati as principal in Dallas. And then before that, when he was 16, Reiner hired him as second trumpet in Pittsburgh in 1944. He left Cleveland when he was 60, but he'd been playing for 44 years.
That's crazy.
Bernie's a real interesting character, but you look into any of these orchestras, you see some really interesting characters.
Yeah.
Different lineages and different people. York Philharmonic, you got Chris Martin. Before him was Phil Smith. Before Phil Smith for about 5 years was Jerry Schwartz and Lou Ranger. And then you start looking at, Schwartz has some really interesting solo trumpet records. There's a cornet record and another one called Age of Splendor, which is a Baroque record that is sensational. Also a soprano, a piccolo trumpet, a Baroque record. And then Lou and Jerry Schwartz, Ray Mace, Lou Soper, Gould, a bunch of guys in the mid-'70s did this New York Trumpet Ensemble recordings that are also really great. And then before them was Vacchiano. Before Vacchiano was Harry Glantz. Before Harry Glantz was Gustav Heim. And you start, looking at, who these guys were and what they were doing. L.A. Phil, you had Tom Hooton, fabulous player. Before him was Tom Stevens. Before Stevens was a guy named Les Remsen. Before Les Remsen was Vladimir Drucker, who's another guy who was in the studios, who studied with Schlossberg. And Vladimir Drucker played a year here. He played a year in San Francisco. He played a little bit in the LA Phil. Then he went into the studios.
Interesting.
Back then, the studios paid more. So you had Vladimir Drucker and Yuan Racy and Manny Klein and Rafael Mendez. Amp also came out from Minneapolis in 44 to work in the studios. I think he was working at Disney. I'm not exactly sure. I think Disney, one of the studios, or RKO, Paramount, one of those. Now, so you start looking into it. It's just like this spider web of all this intricacy. Like you mentioned, some of those guys, like Yuan, who did Chinatown.
Yeah.
Also did American in Paris. Go watch the movie American in Paris from 51, and that's Mr. Racy. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So, take like American in Paris. So when I play Gershwin American in Paris, I go listen to Yuan Racy play. And I go listen to, there's some older recordings of Gershwin and the Paul Whiteman guys playing Gershwin. Go to the source for the style. So I'm listening to that and I'm trying to mimic that. Or I saw a master class where Doc Severinsen taught, actually one of my students played some American in Paris stuff for him, and Doc played it, which was like, this bravura. It was smoke it. It was great. I could never play it like that. People kill me. There's something about it where it's like, I can't do exactly that, but there's a lot I could use there. There's a spark there, energy there that I definitely can use.
Yeah.
That's I would just say find recordings that you like and then start digging in, like who are these players? And then all the pop music, all the stuff Jerry Hay did, you start going into that.
Yeah. Yeah, his new book that came out is
awesome.
It's so awesome.
I was one of the first guys. I bought 4 of them, one for me and one for each of the other guys in the section here.
Yeah, I've gone through it and I'm just looking at some of the stuff like, oh my gosh, wow. And then I've been like listening to, somebody compiled a playlist of like everything, and I've been going through and listening. I'm like, this is so good, man.
It's frightening, and a lot of that, those guys were doing it, analog.
Yeah,
those guys had to knock it down. it wasn't like you could, piece it all together now. No. Those guys are doing it like.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's mind-bogglingly impressive.
It is, yeah.
Anytime.
To wrap up our conversation, one last question. What do you know now that you wish you would have known when you were younger?
Being patient is one of the great virtues that will help you. Don't take things too seriously. Don't get too wound up if you're not figuring something out immediately. I mean, I was very impatient. I get very frustrated very quickly when I was younger. And if I could tell my younger self anything, it would be just play the long game. Some stuff in the short game you'll figure out. Play the long game. Be diligent and just figure it out. And it's all about ingraining the right habits and reinforcing the right habits. And I was very fortunate early on. My teachers instilled in me a very strong sense of creating good fundamentals, getting a good warm-up, making sure that I was doing my Arbin, Schlossberg, Clark, then, add in Bylin, Gecker, articulation studies, endurance drills, Francane, method, Shewbrook, and any number of different, books you can get into with that. Playing melodious etudes, Conconi's, Rochu's, Phil Snedeker's books, Phil Collins's books, Chris Gecker's books, and anything with lyrical etudes, changing styles. Cultivate your sound. I mean, I was lucky. I had some, my teachers, I had teachers that were all about cultivating a great sound, cultivating great fundamentals, really, really digging that down and really setting it in right and working to make those things consistent. Yeah. And that the consistent, correct way becomes the habit. That you're always reinforcing and stacking upon good things. And that's the best way. I mean, if you really look back at take Stamp, for instance, or Schlossberg, which Stamp Schlossberg is relative.
Yeah.
So much of it is about having your air moving the correct way, having your air support happening correctly. Mm-hmm. What's happening between the notes, the connective tissue between the notes, going center one note directly to the center of the next note, the evenness throughout your ranges, the consistency and clarity and ease of your articulation, like your speech, the convergence of air and articulation, the timing of the start of the note, whether it's a poo attack or a two attack or anything in between. And having that facility and that consistency, and then with that, you start spreading out like how far the parameters of how far you can swing one way or the other between staccatissimo, legatissimo. From 3 P's to 3 F's, from, double G down to pedal C, and just having all of that aligned and understanding where those slots belong. And that a lot of it for me was synthesized when I started seeing Mr. Stamp and everything from that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those elements, but I was already having a lot of that baked in when I was younger, when I was in high school and especially in college with Tony and then with Mr. Stamp. That's really the best thing I would say is just have patience, get good guidance, have patience. As long as you're doing the right stuff and have the right concept, eventually it will come. And sometimes it's one of those things where you wake up 3 months, 6 months, a year later, and all of a sudden you can single tongue faster. Your range is increased. Stuff is happening much better and much more efficiently. And the more you can get it, the trumpet just feels like it's an extension of your voice, and it's just, you're just singing through the horn. Yeah. And it feels easy. It feels natural. It feels as if playing the trumpet is like you're speaking or singing. That it's that natural and that easy and that efficient. And then that's kind of the barometer. Things are heading the right.
Yeah, I love it. Michael, again, this has been great. Thank you so much for taking so much time out of your busy schedule to chat with me and tell us about your story, your experience, and thoughts on the trumpet and everything. We really apprate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jade. It's my pleasure.
We'll let you know when the book is done. We'll send you a copy.
Yeah, I'll be very curious to see it.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited to see how it turns out. So awesome. Well, thank you again.
My pleasure.